Very good evening. Thanks for joining us here on Mirror Now. I'm Afrida Rahman Ali. The top focus at this hour is on the issue of whether a woman still needs to establish her identity only through her spouse. And we are talking about no ordinary person, but someone like Priyanka Chopra. For people in India, Priyanka Chopra needs no introduction. As someone who has risen to fame as a global icon, one can say with absolute certainty that the fact that she's married to singer-actor Nick Jonas is purely incidental, isn't it? Yet a publication reporting on her latest movie release in New York refers to her as wife of Nick Jonas. Her name itself also doesn't find a mention in that article. The occasion was the movie promotion of The Matrix Resurrection in New York, where she will be seen alongside Keanu Reeves and Carrie Ann Moss in January next year. The post was exposed by Priyanka Chopra herself on her Instagram page, where she questions why is this still happening to women. So Priyanka shared screenshots and she says, very interesting that I am promoting one of the most iconic film franchises of all times and I am still referenced as the wife of. She further says, please explain how this still happens to women. Should I add my IMDb link to my bio? So an actor, a producer, an author also now, an entrepreneur, a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. Priyanka Chopra is clearly one of the biggest stars in Bollywood, a renowned face in Hollywood as well, especially after her lead role in the American television show Quantico. Yet, the author of the article published by Daily Mail could only think of wife of Nick Jonas as her introduction. What does that say about society in general, about society's attitude towards successful and highly accomplished women? No accomplishment is big enough to deserve an introduction, an identity that a woman can claim to be her own. Does she still need her husband's name to establish her identity? Her lifetime of work, not enough to give her an identity completely on her own merit? These are questions we want to address today. Let me introduce my guests this evening. Joining us here on Mirror Now, Trisha Shetty, who's an advocate and founder of the NGO called She Says. Also joining us, will be joining us shortly, is Barkhat Rehan, who's a gender rights activist. But first, I'm going to go across to my colleague Griha, who flagged off this story for us. Griha, Priyanka Chopra, former Miss World, she is the first Asian woman to be cast in a lead role in an American television show. Very clearly, a very recognizable face in Hollywood as well. She has to take her husband's name. She has to be introduced with her husband's name in an article, which shows, and this is the first world we are talking about, Griha. This is New York we are talking about. Griha, can you hear me? Griha, can you hear me? Okay, I'm not able to establish contact with Griha. I don't think she's able to hear me. So I'm going to go across to Trisha then. Okay, Trisha, coming to you. Trisha, you know, like I said, no amount of accomplishment seems to be enough for a woman to get an introduction that reflects her own merit, her accomplishments, rather than who she's married to.
I do not think that there should be a question at all about accomplishments, you know, just by the virtue. Like, even if you have no accomplishments, just by the virtue of your being, you deserve to be referred to as your name, your first name, or the name that you want to be called at, and not wife of, son, or, you know, daughter of, granddaughter of, because it establishes clearly that your identity is only of value when it's linked to an identity of a man, either a husband or a father. And that's problematic. I am glad that you brought up that, you know, this is seeming to happen even in America. Let's not forget what happened when Amal Clooney and George Clooney got married, one of the most accomplished barristers who has a history of fighting for deeply problematic cases of survivors of the Yazidi genocide and sexual abuse and violence. She's been fighting for Nadia Murad, a Nobel Peace Laureate, for her to get justice against ISIS at the International Court of Justice, ICJ. And even she has been routinely, subject to this sort of sexist, misogynistic mindset, where she's referred to, despite of all her accomplishments, as George Clooney's wife.
Yes.
So this is a problem that unfortunately we face all over the world. And I think it just highlights again why it's so important to celebrate women, gender non-conforming people, for all of their agency, regardless of their accomplishments. I shouldn't have to have accomplished something.
I take that point, Trisha. Very well said, that it's not about accomplishments as well. I mean, I am, by sheer the fact that I am a woman, I have a name, is an identity. I should not be referred to as someone's wife, mother, sister, whatever else. I mean, that itself is an issue here in India, but now it seems, Trisha, that it's not an Indian phenomena in any way. This is across the globe, this kind of patriarchy, as you call it. You referred to George Clooney and Amal Clooney, and I remember the headline. There was one particular publication that chose to headline it saying, world-renowned lawyer is married to an actor. There was only one particular headline I do remember that actually highlighted, though it was a little tongue-in-cheek because it was supposed to be in response to all the other kind of headlines which you were mentioning. Abhijit Banerjee, also Nobel laureate, when his wife, who's also a Nobel laureate, came to India, it seems Dr. Esther Duflo was introduced as Abhijit Banerjee's wife. So like you said, there are a number of examples. What exactly do you think is the reason that people do not get it? Like you and me are, sometimes I feel, are barking up the wrong tree because people don't get it. Are we saying this won't happen again? It will, isn't it?
You are absolutely right. I think this, bear with me, right? Every time we talk about sexual violence and abuse cases, you hear this often. Male politicians especially saying, oh, I care about gender. I have a daughter. I have a wife. I have a sister. And the reason why we as feminist activists keep calling that out and saying, no, I don't care. You don't need to refer to women as your wife, your sister, your daughter for our lives to have more value is because this is symptomatic of so many other microaggressions, because this very much is a microaggression that we as women have to face every day of our life. Right? There are so many systematic barriers we have to deal with when it comes to representation, when it comes to equal pay, when it comes to going to work without facing harassment, walking on the streets without facing harassment. And then you have this, again, where media, publications choose to reduce your identity down to whom you are married to. What is that if not another microaggression, another systematic barrier? So what is the way forward? I think exactly how Priyanka Chopra did it, calling it out. Okay. Naming and shaming them, calling it out. And even when well-meaning people say, oh, I care about gender because I have a daughter, say no. You don't have to be someone's daughter for you to care about gender rights, right? So, and pushing for these systematic barriers that we see to keep, being replaced. And again, you cannot take her color away. She's a brown woman. And you're reducing a brown woman's identity down to her husband. So there is also, I think, the question of race that very much plays into this.
Yes. Trisha, I'm going to bring in my colleague Griha, who flagged off this story for us. Griha, you and me were discussing this, and it's interesting that even in the first world, there's rampant sexism across the world. And irrespective of professional accomplishments, identities are tied to the spouse. The larger question is there is patriarchy deeply entrenched in all of this. But talking about Priyanka Chopra in particular, would you say that she has, in fact, taken just the right step by calling it out? It has provoked this discussion, and this kind of discussion is important, isn't it, Griha?
Oh, absolutely, Afrida. And you said it right there. In fact, we as journalists are not allowed to take sides. We shouldn't. But why not, go ahead, call out sexism for what it is? And this is what Priyanka Chopra did. And, I would just take an interesting word, roast. She recently roasted the Jonas family. In her own assertion, she'd call herself the most popular Jonas. And the facts and figures are out there. She has over, I think, 27.5 million Twitter followers and 71.6 million Instagram followers. It's actually, the number speaks for themselves, because right now everything is out there on social media. And she's gone ahead and said that all the Jonas brothers actors together, and we are not really pitting it out, but just putting it in a lighter vein, that, you know, all of them together do not have the kind of following that Priyanka Chopra has out there. And she's the first South Asian woman, because one of the panelists were talking about this question of race, which actually comes in when it is the case of Priyanka Chopra. Because when she got married to Nick Jonas, there was a magazine that literally went ahead to call her a modern day scam artist, to have scammed Nick Jonas into marrying her, and in that sense giving him a life sentence by doing that. Incidentally, that magazine obviously had to come out with an apology, but yet these things were written about Priyanka Chopra when this marriage with Nick Jonas happened. But why do we actually discount the fact that she is one of the most popular faces that Hindi film industry has put out there, and that, you know, she's made a name for herself in Hollywood. She's hosted, you know, ceremonies like the Golden Globes, which is a big feather in her cap. She's, I mean, in the year 2000, she's won us the Miss World. That is speaking for something. She's the first South Asian woman to have done an American series like Quantico. So all of that, she's doing Matrix Resurrections with Keanu Reeves. I mean, things like this speaks for the kind of body of work that we're talking about this lady. So just, you know, probably relegating her to becoming somebody, you know, somebody's wife is actually demeaning her body of work, which is immense. And that is something that Priyanka Chopra called out. That is something that we should go ahead.
Yes, which is why, you know, we are doing this, Griha. And Barkha Trehan is also with us. She's a gender rights activist. Barkha, why does this happen? I want to ask you, why does this happen? Is it because, you know, women are supposed to be seen, not heard? Is it because she's of a brown race? What exactly is the reason that even in an international publication, Priyanka Chopra is introduced as wife of Nick Jonas? The rest of her accomplishments completely didn't matter.
I guess what's wrong in it? I don't understand why we are making a mole out of a mountain. Oh, what's wrong if she's called by Nick Jones' name? What's wrong?
No, her name has not been mentioned in that article. It is simply said that in this movie you have wife of Nick Jonas. Are you really telling me that's fair and that's justified? Not to even give her the dignity of mentioning her name? Forget about her other accomplishments. Is she only wife of Nick Jonas?
She is the wife, and she's a proud wife, and she chose to marry him. So even if it comes like this, what's the big deal about it? I don't know why Priyanka is even creating a lot of fuss about it.
Okay, I'm really surprised you say that, because I mean, you know, for somebody who fights for gender rights, I thought there is a reason why this is objectionable. Priyanka Chopra finds it objectionable.
Tell me.
No, I told you, because this is sexism. Because this is clear. There's a clear sexism in it. I'll allow Trisha to actually respond to you. Trisha Shetty, go ahead.
Just reverse it.
You know, honestly, if someone chooses to celebrate sexism, good for them, and good for their regressive mindset. I really don't want to even acknowledge this in any way. It's such regressive thinking that it doesn't deserve an acknowledgement, according to me. Good for you. Good for you celebrating sexism and upholding the patriarchy. Well done.
Okay, Barkha Trehan, you know, I hope you understood why we are doing this. We are doing this not because it's just Priyanka Chopra. We are doing this because women are often reduced to somebody's wife, sister, daughter, and referred to as such. Sure, we are proud to be so-and-so's daughter or wife, but that is not the primary identity that women want to carry. Because if you...
What do we want to prove here?
No, are you somebody who endorsed male superiority or somebody who endorsed sexism? Then we'll have to leave it at that, because then there would be no point of further discussion.
No, it's not about it. It's about a lovely relationship. And if we just reverse it, would you see the same thing?
No, what do you mean reverse it?
If Nick Jones has said that he is Priyanka's husband, then would you react like this?
I mean, really, that hardly ever happens. But even if it does, yes, we would. We would say that Nick Jonas is a singer.
No,
he is a musician. He's a singer in his own right. He's not just Priyanka Chopra's husband. Okay, I'll have to leave it at that with Barkha Trehan. Thanks for joining us, bringing Griha back into the conversation. So fine, we do accommodate all viewpoints, and we allow the likes of Barkha Trehan also to put their points across, who believes that, okay, there's nothing wrong in it. Griha, Do you see that patriarchy is so deeply entrenched now? There are a lot of women also who probably are conditioned into this mindset or who think that there is absolutely nothing wrong in it. That again is something which sets us back, isn't it? When we see among us, there are women who do not agree, Griha.
Absolutely. It's very surprising that a gender rights activist is actually going ahead and saying that. I'm not actually trying to pinpoint at a particular viewpoint, and yet I am. Because only recently, when Priyanka Chopra went ahead, dropped that surname of hers from her social media handles, a lot of hullabaloo was made over it. You know, why such a thing? I mean, we're talking about reversals. Why is this not the case when, let's say, a man goes ahead and does that? In Sonam Kapoor's case, when her husband decided to use her surname after marriage, so much was said about it in a good way. But you know, we don't see examples like this often. And when we say that we are so entrenched in patriarchy, like you rightly said, Afrida, nobody goes ahead and questions it because it's actually normal for them. And which is what we are seeing it by one of the panelists in this debate. I really can't say much about that kind of an issue brought forth while we are actually discussing about sexism, which is so rampant. And
Yes.
here we are talking about a youth icon, a celebrated actor who has been celebrated not just in the country but worldwide. And her work speaks for herself. And she's the one who was obviously irked by this particular article. She's the one who called it out. And had it not been the case, it would have been, you know, obviously nothing would have probably been said about it. It would have been taken in a lighter vein. And nobody like us would have been probably discussing it because, you know, it has actually it's actually normal to not talk about sexism like we've seen in many cases where people think, okay, what happened? It's no big deal. Or she married for love. It's okay to carry her husband's surname, or it's okay to be called someone's wife or someone's mother. But it's certainly not true when the tables are reversed.
Absolutely, and I want to go quickly to Trisha with the last bit of note, a survey, in fact, that says that 84% of women in Andhra Pradesh said it was okay for husbands to beat or hit wives. Only 67% men agreed, 84%. So this is one state in India, Trisha, and perhaps there is a far larger, bigger problem here that we have.
You're right. Actually, there's another survey, but it talks about the same sort of statistic across women in Asia. So also just a correction, the previous panelist is a known males' rights activist and has never been an activist who's fought for women's rights. So
Okay.
I don't expect anything better from someone who espouses the benefits of living in a sexist framework. Look, it's deeply problematic of not just the times that we're living in, but also the past as well as the future. This cannot be the reality that we continue to pass on to our future generations, that a woman's identity has more value when associated with a man in some capacity or the other, either as a wife or as a daughter, right? So what is the antidote to this? To call it out using media channels like yours, where you and your fellow panelists have come forward and called it what it is, sexist. What is the antidote for this? To keep celebrating women's agency, regardless of their accomplishments, to keep recognizing that they have agency over their body, to make their own bodily decisions, to call out politicians who make sexist remarks unapologetically, and keep pushing back against the pushback if we are to live in a better reality.
Okay, that's very well articulated. Thank you so much, Trisha Shetty, for joining us. And Griha, also in Barkha, Rehan, thanks very much for giving us your views as well. Griha, thanks for joining us.